Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the next edition of iCar's Repairers Realm. We're going to be talking a little bit today about laser brazed roof replacement. And here on my left, I have Mr. Dirk Fuchs, and on the right, Mr. Scott Caboose. Scott, can you kind of introduce yourself to the world here?
Sure. So Scott Caboose, I'm with American Honda. I take care of everything collision related for American Honda, from training to technology. I work with the warranty department, I work with the publication department, special tools department, and basically work on behalf of the collision industry to make sure our voice is heard. They're even letting me work with some of the engineers now and doing some pre-planning, which is great. I love that opportunity that they're giving me. Been with Honda for about 5 years. Before that, I was a structural technician for over 20 years and then a college instructor after that. And I've loved every step of the way through my career. It's just been something different all the time. It's always changing. There's always something to learn. And even this is new to me, so this is kind of fun.
Yeah, well, thanks for joining us.
Very welcome.
So you want to start us off? What's our first question today, Dirk?
So, of course, yeah. I'm really super proud to be here and have Scott here in our studio. And what I see on the material already, I learned a lot. And I always point that out, that my learning curve, as we know, in the collision industry is pretty steep. And that's the reason I'm really super proud here. And Scott, thank you for coming by. So Scott, we talked today about laser brazed roofing replacement. So what made you, I was in the meetings when we talked about it. So what made you think like this is a great subject, and what drove you to say, hey, let's do this? So what's behind it?
So I think the real reason we came up with this as our first one is it's such a unique procedure. You're actually installing the panel in a different procedure than it was installed at the factory, which is unusual for Honda. Usually you're going to put the panels on pretty close to the way we installed them at the factory. This one you can't do that. So at the factory we laser braze both sides along the apertures and we weld the front and the back. And it's a really nice way to assemble the car. So this started with our 2017 Clarity, and then 2018 Accord stepped up after that, and now 22 Civic and 21 Acura TLX. So we've got 4 models, including 2 of our most popular, one was Civic and Accord, that have this procedure on them. And they're all gonna be a little different, but pretty similar. And I think it's really important to make sure, at least the estimators are gonna have to know up front. This isn't a normal deal where you just order a roof and your tech puts it on. There's other parts you need to order. There's other things you need to have. And the technician as well. This isn't something you're gonna put on the way you put the last one on that you did. So it's very different than most other roof replacement procedures.
Great. So I think probably the best place to start is maybe you can share your screen and we can start walking folks through the repair process and some of these things, and then we'll have some video to support the conversation.
Absolutely. So let's just walk through the procedure a little bit, and we'll do this throughout the procedure as well. But let's start in service information. So this is Honda service information you're going to see here. And notice on the left there's a removal process and an installation process. So first we want to look at the removal. How did Honda build this panel? So at the front we've got 18 spot welds. At the back we've got 18 spot welds. Then we've got a laser braze seam called out on the aperture. And then we've got some bolts here too. So there's bolts on each side around the sunroof area or moonroof area. And then you notice that mark A there, that's going to give you a cutaway view and show you what that looks like from a slice. So you've got the roof panel on the left there that comes down and meets the aperture, and there's just a laser braze right in that very corner. And that's what holds the sides of the roof on. Works great from a manufacturer standpoint. From a repairer, though, we don't have the ability to replicate that. We don't have a laser braze machine. I don't know how many millions of dollars that would cost,
right. But
we don't have that access. So they're showing us how to cut that off, and I'm going to go through this real quick because you're going to see this a lot of this throughout the procedure. It does go into showing you how to replace cross members too, just in case you had a tree fall on it and it damaged the cross members. But if you're just replacing the outer panel for like hail damage, you don't have to do that part of the procedure. And then you're going to go into the installation one here, and this is going to tell you how do I put this new thing on, and it's very different than the way I took it off. So we're going to go through some of the welding procedures on the cross members here. And then you notice here where we've got that little bit of the roof that we left on here, we've got to remove that. We've got to get down to just the aperture. And then the new roof comes with these little brackets already installed on the roof panel, and they have encapsulated nuts welded into them. So on the one without a moonroof, there's 4 on each side. On the one with a moonroof, there's 3. And there is nothing to bolt that to in the car. So you can see in the cutaway there, the new roof panel comes on, it's got that little bracket, it's got the nuts on it right here. There's nothing to bolt it to. So now you have to know, I have to purchase some more brackets out of the parts catalog and locate them and install them into those apertures. And we're actually going to weld those in before we can put the roof on.
So how does an estimator know that they need to order those things? In the procedure itself, is it identifying that, hey, these are separate, you need to order this separate from the roof?
So we're going to show you the different part letters here. So it says you need A, B, D, and C. That's not giving you the part number. You actually have to go into the parts catalog, and I've got that pulled up here too. So this is our parts catalog. So when you look at this, this would be a similar image to what you would see in CCC or Mitchell or any of those, because they're using our graphics. And it's showing you these little brackets here and these bolts here. So not only don't you have the brackets, but you don't have the bolts either. Yep. So when we look at a view of this, let me see here. Let me pull, hold on, bear with me just a second. This gives us a little better view. So we're going to see the actual drawing here that shows you all the different parts. And then at the bottom here, you're going to see everything that you need now, because I picked those out of that list. So I need a roof panel, that we knew immediately. But I also need 2 of the inner bracket A's. I need 12 of the bolt washer assemblies. And then I need, the inner D is 2 different parts. There's a left and a right. So I need to make sure that I get the left and the right. And then the bracket C, I need 2 of those. And now we've got almost everything we need to install the roof, but also in the repair procedure, it's going to call for a foam dam that isn't a Honda part. So this is really unique. So almost every time you see a part in a Honda procedure, you're going to see a part number in the catalog. And with this, you're not. It's going to say you're going to need to install this rubber foam dam. And they give you dimensions on it, tell you where to put it. That's the end of the information you have. So I did some searching. I said, okay, what is this? Where do I get it? Where does it belong? I called the guys in Japan. I said, do you have a part number? They said, no, that's pretty common. Most body shops have that laying around. I've been in a few body shops. I've never seen that laying around. So I brought a roll today with me, and this is just what I found. This isn't a Honda endorsement at all, but this is a Kent product through Lawson, and it's just a single-sided foam tape. And all it does is it sits in that groove and it keeps the adhesive from flowing into the car and out of your joint. So once the adhesive's cured, it doesn't do anything, but you can leave it in there, it doesn't hurt. Right. But that's kind of a unique thing. I don't know too many procedures, especially with Honda, that I've ever seen something like that. Yeah. So that's kind of the gist of it. And as we go through here, we'll mention those types of things again. Any other questions before we?
No, I think at this point, why don't we just dive right in? We'll put up the first video segment, and okay. As we're working through the first video segment here, if you can just kind of walk us through what's going on the screen, and
yeah, definitely.
Perfect.
So this was a great project for me. I don't usually get to do a lot of these hands-on activities in the shop, so I was having a lot of fun. So the first thing we had to do is remove the original roof panel. So you could drill these out, you could grind these out, a lot of different ways to break spot welds. I'm sure most of our viewers are familiar with different ways to do that. I like using the file belt sander because I think I can control the depth pretty good and make sure that I'm not hurting that inner structure. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to take a chisel and cut back and separate the welds later.
Yeah, so you can see in the video, everybody's going to be familiar with the VH is using that belt sander to remove the spot welds, yep, so that you can break that loose.
Yeah.
Right. So it's.
Yeah, and the trick with that is to make sure you control your depth. Yeah. A lot of times I'll put in a little pry tool or something, so when I get through the top, it'll pop a little bit, and then I know I'm not going into that second layer.
Deep, exactly.
I have seen some people that have really dug that second layer, and then you're probably replacing more parts than you have to.
Yeah.
So here what we're doing is we're using a micrometer to actually measure the cut line. Honda told us about 8 millimeters from this aperture is where it starts going down, that we want to stay away from it. After I cut this off, I think next time I'll leave a little bit more there, because it's really surgical to stay away from that aperture and not nick it. We're going to protect that aperture as good as we could. My suggestion here, do even more than I did. Take some duct tape over top of that, because you're going to hit it with your tool. You're going to scratch it. The less damage you do it, the less you have to repair when you're done. You're going to paint it anyway, but why make your painters do more primer work than they have to?
Right. So we can see, as you guys are getting this thing prepped here, I know one of the things that we talked about as you guys were doing the cuts here is that there was some challenge getting the blade in there, getting the cutoff wheel in at the angle you needed to make the cut.
Yeah, if you go straight up and down, even at 8 millimeters, if you go too deep, you're going to hit the aperture, because the aperture comes in at about a 45-degree angle. So I tried keeping my blade kind of on that same angle to stay away from it. And if you limit your depth to a couple millimeters, you're probably okay, but sometimes it grabs and then you go farther than you wanted to grab.
Yeah. And then, as you said, then you're creating yourself some problems because you cut through something you shouldn't. Now you got to replace more parts and you've got a
the
problem,
nice thing is the outer aperture is mild steel, so it's 270. There's some repairability to that. If you actually went through that outer aperture into the inner, you could be into 1500 MPa steel, and then you're replacing D-rings, and you got some major problems then.
Yep.
I see now you're cutting.
So we're just using a cutoff wheel here, trying to keep it on that angle, stay away from the aperture.
So what we didn't see is what that's a blank chassis of, what do you have usually to take out inside, like, airbags and all those systems, cables, what are
Yeah, you can
there?
see we're pretty well gutted.
Yep.
And our body and repair manual is written from a body in white. So it's basically just a shell.
Yeah.
So when you look up these procedures, it just tells you where are the welds, how do I cut it off, how do I reattach it. What's not in the body repair manual is all the service information you need to get all of the other stuff out of there.
Yeah.
So we want anything electrical out of the way of any welds for 18 inches or so. We want to make sure we protect any interior components, glass components, things like that. So we really gutted this car. We took out the side curtain airbags, we took out the seats, we took out all the seat belts, we took out the speakers because they can collect residue from the cutting wheels on the magnets. So yeah, there was a lot of work. The camera had to come out, the front windshield, back glass, quarter glasses. There's a lot of disassembly. We probably spent the whole first day just preparing to get this far.
So there is no cutting corners.
No.
And we probably should have started with that to say that all that prep work was done in advance of what we're doing here.
Yeah.
And call out the fact that you've got the welding blankets and the interior that is still there is protected.
Yep.
All those things still need to happen. So we didn't cover that when we started. But you can see we had, it made it a little quicker process having two of you out there.
Oh yeah, it was great having
this.
Anton there to work with, and he was a lot of fun. I enjoyed my time with him, and to have two guys going back and forth. And honestly, this is the first time I've done this procedure. So I'm learning, he's learning, it's his first time. I've read the procedure, I followed the procedure, I've written the procedure, but to actually perform it on the car is the next step, which was great.
Yep, so now you guys have the cuts made on both sides.
Yep.
And I think
So now
next
there's a cross members inside. So here's the structure around the sunroof assembly, and there's some bolts in there. These are not one-time use, so we can take those out and reuse those. So we package them up, set them aside, and we'll put them back in later. And then there's adhesive between the cross members, and a couple different ways to do that. You can use the traditional wire method, just cut through it like we are here. Or I've got a little molding tool that I use in the back area that worked pretty good.
Yep, I think we'll see that in just a minute here. There you go.
So this is actually a molding removal tool, but I've used it for doing NVH foam for years, and it's really handy, especially in those tight areas like the front and the back, where it's hard to get the wire in.
Yeah. So I think you guys have a couple more cuts, and then this thing's ready to come off. Just get a little more adhesive released here, and you're good.
So now we've got 99% of it off. There's still that lip on each side that we've got to remove, and also where we did the filing on the spot welds, we're going to have to do a little touch up on them, make sure they're nice and flat before we go any further.
Yep. But you guys made that look easy. It was
Well,
fast.
the time-lapse video helps.
Yeah, time-lapse video and having two guys working on it helps.
Well, there's a
little
lot
bit
of
there.
parts of this that are going to require two guys. And I'm not saying you have to have two guys the whole time, but there are times that you're going to need two people to get it off of there and get it on there, fit it up.
Yep. Yep. So some of the, and now we're diving into this is more of the prep.
Yeah,
so
so
this
this
is that
is-
additional flange you talked about. that
This
you
is the
have to get
flange
off.
that's left on there, and there's actually quite a bit of metal there. I mean, it's more than a ½ inch, and it's on an angle. So we're grabbing it at the bottom and rocking it back and forth on that laser braze, just trying to get it to snap. And that worked pretty good. We actually went in with a cutoff wheel later and trimmed it a little closer, and that worked a little better. Once you've got the roof out of the way, you can see more what you're doing and make sure you're not hurting anything else. But this was fairly time consuming to get in here with pry tools, and
Yep.
we're just trying not to hurt that aperture to the best of our ability. So now you can see we got back in there with some cutoff wheels where we could be even a little more surgical, where we could see that edge and stay away from the aperture.
So you marked before where you want to cut, and you said it would be better to cut a little wider or away.
Absolutely.
So that would help you also in this prep work now to
Yes.
get that.
Yeah, we're just erring on the side of caution.
Yeah.
We want to make sure we don't hurt anything that we can't fix later.
Right. Yep. It seems that it goes pretty quick here once you get to this point. And then you've got, like you said, the cleanup, where you've got to clean
Yeah.
up the weld areas and the cut areas and get it all prepped. I think we'll come into some of that in a video here in just a minute.
Yep.
But yeah, stuff was tough getting it off there.
Yeah, it honestly was a challenge. I think that's why Anton and I enjoyed it so much. It was a challenge for us too, and
Yeah.
we like that.
So was that the most time-consuming part of the whole thing, from a segment-wise, to clean
I
it
would
up
say,
and
yeah,
prepare
removing
it?
those apertures was probably, or the pieces on the side of the apertures was probably the most tedious part of the job.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can see it came
Oh,
off
yeah.
real easy there, right?
Yeah.
It just came off in chunks.
And then we took file belt sanders, and now we're actually cleaning back that laser braze, and we're just grinding the rest of it out of there and flattening it out. And our goal is to just end up with just the aperture there. You'll still see a little bronze braze there where it's sunk in a little bit, but it's flush.
Yep.
And that's what we need to fit that roof up in there so that the adhesive has the space to work.
So when you were doing this, you guys come up with any tips or tricks, something that worked better than the way you started to get this stuff off? It looks like you're still struggling a little bit to,
It's still
to
a
kinda
struggle.
get it off there.
It
It's
actually is. And I don't know that there's a great way to do it that I would say, oh, if you did this, it'd be really easy and fast. Possibly using a wider stone wheel to grind that back right to the braze might help a little bit, instead of trying to peel it like we were. But then you've got the concern of hitting that
too far.
aperture. Yeah, so if you're really good with that stone wheel, maybe you could do that.
I think we're getting pretty close to the end of what you guys are doing with cleanup here, and then you move into the whole test fit process and
Yeah.
making sure that you got everything right. So. Yep, so here he's cleaning
So now
up
we
the
got
weld
it
a
out of
little
there. Now
more.
we're just kind of smoothing that out. We're going back over the welds and touching them up, just making sure that there's no burrs or anything on there. And again, we're only grinding right where we're going to weld. We're not grinding that whole flange. We want to leave as much of that E-coat and protective coatings on as we can, at least on the front and the back. Now the sides we've got to take right down to metal, because that's what we're going to require to put the adhesive in. You notice how that flange is kind of stepped or scalloped. So your new welds are really going to go back in almost the exact same position where they were. You can move them 1/8 of an inch either way, but there's not that option of offsetting them because they have to go on that raised portion of the inner.
Right.
So that little spot there is the only spot the weld can go. It can't go in between there.
What is this green clipboard I just saw in there? Yeah. Maybe I didn't really recognize. There, you see it on your
Oh, that's a
arm
clip for the visor,
for the, okay.
for the sun visor on
So
the
you could
inside
leave
of the car.
that in, was not a
Yep.
problem, yeah. When I see a clip, I always think, oh, that's something for the camera.
Yeah, you definitely want your weld-through blankets and spark paper and all that for this project, because you're going to throw a lot of material. I even noticed with everything that we did to protect the car, when we were done, there was a lot of residue inside.
Yeah.
And you know, you think, oh, maybe I could have left the carpet in. Like, it would have been a total mess if you did.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And
yeah.
so I really think that had to come out. So here we're actually dry fitting the roof, test fitting, whatever you want to call it. And this is super important on this one because this is how we locate those brackets. So without this, we would not know where to put the brackets in the car. So we want to make sure we put this exactly where we want it. We're taking our time fitting up the flanges exactly where they were. We took some measurements to make sure the windshield and the back glass fit up good. And then the roof is actually set lower than the apertures. So we measured that beforehand, and now we're going to measure it again, just make sure that that height distance is about the same. So that's what we're doing here, is just making sure it steps down. Memory recalls it was about 5 millimeters that it stepped down.
When you put later the adhesive on it, it lifts up the roof a little bit.
Right.
So you calculate that within.
Well, we
and
just
you
had to make sure the brackets went in where it's going to hold it in that right spot.
Yeah.
Once the brackets are in, they're just going to squish that adhesive out. So here we're marking where all those spot welds go because of those scallops. So we want to make sure that we clean the E-coat off in just those areas.
Yeah.
And now we're bolting this in. Now these are the bolts that were in the car that hold that sunroof area. So between the bolts, the flanges and everything, it's pretty hard not to get this in the right position, which is good. Just putting some clamps on there to hold it down. We want to make sure it was fit up exactly where we want it. Because once you weld these brackets in, there's not much you can do to move it.
Yeah.
Here I'm marking the adhesive areas. So the adhesive actually tapers around the front and back of the roof on about 4 or 5 inches. So I'm marking that so that I remember when we prep the inside, we take the E-coat off the inside for the adhesive.
So here's your brackets.
So here's the brackets, yeah. So, and like I said, there's 7 different part numbers here, or 2, 4, 6 different part numbers, yeah. So we got a few different pieces, and it's a left and a right on the middle ones. The backs are the same, the fronts are the same. And
The angle of this bracket's a little bit different.
yeah, the angle, and some are stepped to go around multiple layers.
Yep.
And then in the repair procedure, it tells us that how to install these. And it was interesting because there's 6 welds on each side because you've got 3 brackets, each one gets 2 welds. But some of them were spot welds, and one on each side was a plug weld. And I got looking at it, that area of the car is a 5-layer stack of material. And I've never seen a procedure for Honda to have a spot weld through 5 layers. So I'm assuming that's why they wanted us to plug weld it. So here we're just marking or scribing around the area where the brackets are. So they're bolted into the roof. The roof's in the right position. Now we got to mark where these brackets go because we can't weld them with the roof in the way.
Right.
So we're actually going to have to take these off. And notice I marked these with their letters too. So that's the rear one, C. And the paint pens seem to work pretty good here. I mean, it bleeds just a little bit, but you can position it pretty close. If you really want to be precise, you could scribe it. Then we're marking here where the welds are going to go, so we need to clean the E-coat off again for the welds. Then we're just fixing any little bit of damage that we did on any of the flanges. And now we're ready to take it back off. So now this is our final prep work done to the apertures. So we're just grinding off anything that's in the way of the adhesive and making sure we've got bare metal where the adhesive is going to go.
You know, I always think from a corrosion standpoint, when you make such an intensive work. The adhesive is the only corrosion protection what you put on.
That'll be the only corrosion protection actually in that joint.
In the
Yep,
joint, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Now, on the inside where the brackets go in that, we'll epoxy primer that when we're done and paint it.
Yeah.
But yeah, actually in the joint, that's all you have is that adhesive.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
You'll see when they do it later that the adhesive goes on both sides.
So here I'm
So
just
you make sure
transferring
that
the
you've got
marks
it all
of where I
cleaned
need
up.
to clean off that panel. This is for the adhesive and where the welds go. And notice we're just doing the spots where we're going to weld. We're not removing all the E-coat. Whatever we can leave on there helps. Notice the inside of the panel, we sprayed that with a 2K sealer and then a little bit of a catalyzed base coat to match what it looked like on the original panel. We did that before we installed it.
So now we're going to weld in some brackets.
Yeah, so now we're going to locate those brackets based on those scribe lines or paint lines we made. So you notice that one's got a hole in it for a plug weld. And wax and grease remove everything, make sure everything's clean. Then we're removing any of the loose NVH foam. If it's solid, if it's fully attached, we can go right over the top of it. But if it's loose or flaking or anything like that, we're going to take that off. And here we're just putting weld-through primer on the mating surfaces of the spot welds. So that's Honda's only place you're going to put weld-through primer. We don't use it when we're mag welding. But if you're spot welding and there's no adhesive, we want you to put zinc-rich weld-through primer on those spots. Now we're going to do a little test weld. So I set up a stack identical to what's on the car for those spots. Most of those were 4-layer. And then we're going to destructively test that and just make sure the machine's working right. We pulled a good chunk out of there. So I'm pretty happy with how that worked. Now I can go to the car and I can be pretty confident I'm going to get a successful weld on the car. This was really nice having two guys for this too.
Yeah, I remember watching you do it. You guys tried to go to a smaller set of arms, but it just wouldn't work. So
Yeah, you couldn't get the smaller arm in with a long enough tip to get around the aperture. So it was really nice having two guys to stabilize that. And so there'll be 5 spot welds on each side of the car. And once you've got those located, this is pretty simple.
Yeah, very quick.
So now we're going to make the plug welds. So I made a little test coupon here to set up the welder because it's a unique stack. It's 5 layers thick. So that heat is going to get absorbed by that stack of material there. So I'm not going to set this welder up for a 0.6 piece of metal because it'd just be way too cold. So I had to play with it a little bit and adjust it, and we finally dialed it in. It took us a few coupons. And then when we got down to where we thought we had the welder adjusted right, we went back and made a test weld and destructively tested it, and it pulled a good nugget. So now I'm happy the welder's set up right, I'm doing things right, I can go weld these in the car with a good expectation of a good outcome. So this is just replacing that NVH foam. This is a Torsen product that I've really come to really like. Torsen makes a lot of materials for our manufacturing side, but they don't do as much on the repair side. But they're coming out with some new materials, and this NVH foam, I've got some that I applied over a year and a half ago, and it's still nice and spongy. It didn't dry, it didn't crack, it didn't shrink. So I was really happy with that, so I wanted to use it in a real world scenario like this.
So that's required by Honda, or I could
No,
choose
we
a
don't call out
different
anything
brand?
for
Okay.
any of our sealers. So it's really up to you to determine what matches the car.
Yeah,
And for the adhesives, we do.
yeah.
Excuse me.
So here you're putting on that foam dam.
Yeah, this is that foam dam, and you can see it just lays right on there, sticks in there. You've got to cut it around all of those brackets because those brackets are actually going to fit tight against each other. There's no room for it there. And it mentions that in the body repair manual, shows you where to cut it out. Now we're cleaning the edges here, getting ready to do our adhesive. Now this is unique. This is not what we suggest shops do, but we're using 2 different adhesives.
Yep.
And we're just looking at, is there any difference in the application to these? So Anton's using the 3M7333 that we call out. I'm using a equivalent product here by Lord Fuser. And we really didn't see a big difference. I mean, definitely color is a difference, but it really doesn't matter color-wise. But they both tooled out really nice, both seemed to lay out good. Didn't have any issues with either one of them.
But I see you put a layer of both sides, a layer on the roof and a layer on the vehicle? Or?
Yeah, and then we're going to tool that out like we're doing here to make sure that all that bare metal is covered, because like you mentioned, that's our only corrosion protection in those joints. So now we're getting ready to set it on for the last time. Once we set this on, we can slide it a little bit, but we can't pick it up again.
Yeah.
So you want to be pretty close to where you want to go.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you got to clean all that off, start over. And you've got about a 90-minute work time on those products. So you've got to be pretty diligent with what you're doing here to make sure you get it completed in that time frame. So once we get it set on, the first thing we're going to do is use those locating brackets and tighten those down.
So if I remember right, when you guys did this, you went in with the bolts and you used them to position the roof, but didn't actually tighten everything.
Right,
until
we left
after you
everything
did.
loose until we had them all lined up. That
All
way if it
lined
had
up.
them scooch just a little bit, it
Yep.
would.
Yeah.
Yep, and then
And we
came
did the
back-
same thing with the ones around the sunroof area.
Yep, and then came back to torque.
Yep. So once they're all in there, we went back and torqued them.
I love that tool.
Yeah, I do too. And this is important. I think if you use like a 1/4-inch air ratchet or a battery operated tool, you'd really over torque those. Let me look up what
Remember
that.
the torque of that?
I'm going to pull it up here and just remind myself. So this was 9.3 Newton meters,
Oh, okay.
which converts to about 6.9 pound feet.
Yeah.
So it's very light.
That's more.
Yeah.
That's close to hand tied.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
So what you don't want to do is over tighten them, because you'll probably strip them out, and then you're
Yep.
going to lose the mechanical fastening ability.
Right, so now you're just cleaning out the excess adhesive.
Yeah,
Get that joint all
if I
cleaned
did
up.
this again, I would put tape on the roof side too, just to make cleanup a little easier.
Yep, yep.
It took us a little time to clean that up. Of course, time-lapse video is magical, so it only took us 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And then Honda in the repair procedure tells you how wide that bead should be on the outside. So they want it tooled down till it's only 3 millimeters wide. And then once it cures, you're actually going to go over it with a seam sealer that's a little wider. So now we're doing our test welds for the front and back. So these are just 2-layer welds in most positions. Now, one thing we didn't have on this roof that you will on some other ones is where we're welding to ultra high strength steel. So if this was being welded to ultra high strength steel, we'd have to put manual settings on that welder, because Honda doesn't want auto set used for ultra high strength steel. So that would be an additional step on some welds if it had that. I think the Civic actually has that.
So at a few camera shots I saw on the side, the adhesive still present. You can see
Yep.
it. You let it dry out like this, and then you wait later with the paint job. You paint over it,
Yeah,
or how
so-
that goes.
At the laser brazed areas where
Yep.
we adhesively bonded that, we'll sand that down till it's pretty narrow, and then we'll put regular seam sealer over top of that and smooth that out,
Yeah.
and then that'll get primered and
Okay.
painted.
Thank you.
Yeah, 'cause
When you're
it's-
done, it looks seamless. I mean, it looks like the roof in the car was made in one piece.
Yep.
And that's part of the design team, what they were after when they wanted to do this. They said, you know, we're sick of those big, wide, black gutter moldings that run down there. They just look ugly. So how can we build this car to look more seamless and flow better? And they came up with this procedure, and they seem to like it because they're putting it on more and more models now.
Yeah, so that's the end of the video for this. And
Excellent.
thanks for walking us through the procedure. You know, I'd look at that and think, boy, I wonder how many times a tech gets to the point of installing this roof and somebody missed the fact that we need those additional brackets.
Yeah.
And now the car's got to be either sit in a stall or go back out. Probably sit in a stall because you got the old roof off already.
He may have the roof
and
cut
now
off
it's going to
already.
have to sit there and wait
Yeah.
for those brackets.
Yeah.
So
and
it's
with parts problems today with everybody. It's not just us, it's every manufacturer's having parts problems. You don't want to miss parts. You want to have everything there so you can do the job when it comes in the door.
Yep.
So you definitely don't want to be waiting 2 or 3 weeks to get bracket B because you didn't see it.
Yeah.
So to me, that'd be a big kick.
Thanks for the explanation and walking us through this.
You're
At
welcome.
this point, we'll go ahead and open this up to questions. If anybody out there has questions you'd like to ask while we have Scott here with us, please send those through now. So I think you had a couple other parts while we're waiting for the questions to come through. I think you had a couple other parts you wanted to just show us examples, if you want to go
I
ahead.
just had the brackets here.
We just want to know, type it into the chat, type the question in the chat.
Yeah,
All right,
when you
so-
have questions, then please type it into the chat. That was the note what we got, that we can pass them along to Scott. So Scott, you have the brackets here.
Yeah, so here's another set of brackets. I don't know if you can see them real good on the
You probably have to
screen
put
or
them up
not.
on
Probably
edge.
have to tip them up here. But one key, when you get these, they've got the part number on them. You're only seeing that one. There we go. So you've got the part number on that. I'll move over here a little bit more. And it doesn't say ABCD on them. Now, one key is if your parts guy is really trying to help you out and he says, well, you know what, I'm going to take those tags off there so the body tech doesn't have to do that. And they clean them off. Well, now you've got a part that you don't know which number it is and you don't know where it goes on the car.
Yeah.
So thanks for helping me out, but now I don't know what to do with this. So I would make sure that you put a letter or number or whatever on that as you're prepping that part before you take that sticker off, just so you don't forget that, hey, this one goes in this position. And you notice like the flange on here, this one's stepped to go from 4 layers to 5 layers. So that's the one that has a left and a right because one's opposite of the other. And that is the one that gets the plug weld in it too. Then the bolts are just pretty common, 10 millimeter head bolts, 6 millimeter thread, and but you've got to buy a dozen of them.
Yeah.
So, and on the one with no moonroof, there's 4 more.
Nice. So our first question is, why not sell the attachments with the roof? We knew that was coming, right?
Dane, is that you? So I would love to, and that was my idea back in 2018. It says, why don't we sell this as a kit? Roof installation kit. Comes with a panel, the brackets, the bolts, everything. Best I can gather is they come from different manufacturers, and another third party would have to be involved to assemble that. So it didn't happen. Maybe it'll happen someday. Maybe we can get it to happen, but for right now, you've got to pay attention to the procedure and know what to order. I would love to make it a kit. I don't see why we can't do that, but it's been a struggle.
Yeah, I would like, you guys can do this just for your own research, but I think it would be interesting to look at the number of roofs sold compared to the number of brackets sold.
I thought about doing, I actually pulled the roof sales. We've sold 85 of these roofs, and these fit 18 to 22 a cord. So we've sold a few. There's some guys out there. Some of you probably have done this procedure. But I didn't want to pull the other numbers because I didn't want to know.
You think that you could potentially have a tech that gets to that point to put it back on and thinks, well, maybe this roof is for more than one vehicle and I just don't need these on this vehicle.
Yeah.
There's a lot of parts that have configurations for options and,
Yeah.
and different
Or if
things
you're
in
not
there.
pulling up procedures, how do you know that you're not supposed to weld it on somehow? Well, now you got a 6-foot weld that you're going to put on this thing. You're probably going to warp it.
We're going to hope that there's nobody out there that's not pulling procedures before they're working on these
That's a
cars.
great hope. That's a great hope. And I hope that day does come, but I don't think we're there yet.
Yep. Next question is, does it tell you when you pick a roof that these panels requires brackets and bolts? So I think I asked that earlier when you had the procedure up itself, and did it highlight the fact that you need to order these brackets and bolts separately?
So it just shows the parts separately. So it shows you the roof, it shows you the brackets, it shows you the bolts. It doesn't say, there's no big red flag that says, hey, you've got to do all this. And then in the parts catalog itself, it just shows you all those parts. Well, if you're not familiar with a procedure, it's going to be very difficult for you to know that, okay, I chose the roof panel, but it's not going to give me a pop-up that says, oh, when you order this, you need to order X, Y, Z, and PQ. as well.
So it's really important that it's not just the technicians with the procedure, it's the blueprinters as well.
Absolutely.
As they're
It
writing
starts with that blueprinter.
As they're blueprinting this up front, they need to
Yeah.
understand, how to read these procedures and understand that they need to order these things
Yeah.
to keep that repair moving.
Yeah, and if that's the only thing that comes out of this repair's realm is that we got to get up front on this, I think it was well worth it.
Well, two things, we're up front and use OE procedures.
Use procedures, yes.
We need to be looking at those procedures.
Let me circle back to the brackets, what you had. You had the original part number there.
Yes.
And I can't even remember, when you were in the service, no, when you were in the parts catalog, there was then at the picture of the parts catalog, the parts number, and then it was like an A, B, C, or D located there. That was in the parts catalog, correct? So, okay, that's the important message, and that's what you said. When you have a good parts guy, he can directly draw, okay, this is A, this is B, and this is C, what helps the repair
Absolutely.
process a lot.
Yeah, if you can put those letters on it, because the
Yeah.
letters are what's in the service information.
The
The part
letters-
number is in the parts catalog.
Okay,
But
that
it is
was-
duplicated, so
okay.
if you want to show my screen quick a minute, we can show what that looks like.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. Yeah.
Let me get rid of the full parts list. We can just look at what we want. So here you've got the roof panel, and then you've got the bracket inner, and it listed as A. Now that A is
Yeah.
consistent with the A in the service manual.
Yep.
And then you've got a D right, a D left. That D is consistent with the service manual.
and
Then
yeah.
the C, which is the back one, is consistent.
Yeah. And you have the part number in front,
Right.
so you can now locate.
Yeah, so the service information doesn't give you the part number,
Yep.
but it gives you the letter.
Yep.
The parts catalog is going to give you both, and then you've got to match them together.
Yeah.
So it is tricky. I'm not going to lie to you. It's a lot of work and a lot of things that people have to know up front, and that's part of the reason we thought this was important.
But it's a common example of the level of research that needs to be done as we're doing the blueprinting and repairs on these vehicles today, because it's not as simple as just open up a procedure and it just
No.
spells it all out. You have to do your homework.
Yeah.
It takes time. You have to do that. Our next question is: are the sunroof tubes plugged off? Debris could get in there and plug up the drain tubes. Now, I didn't see that in the procedure, but it was something that I watched you and Anton do to plug that off to make
Yeah,
sure we
we
didn't have
took
that
little
issue.
earplugs and jammed them down in the holes. But yeah, good call. You definitely want to tape them off or plug them somehow. I try not to remove them from the cars because they're such a pain to get back in.
Yep.
But yeah, it is important to do that. Good call.
So I hear you all the time saying, I saw you doing. Why you didn't help?
Well, they didn't want somebody else in there getting in the way, I guess. They didn't want me to go in there and slow them down. But we had Scott and Anton were having so much fun that they didn't want to share. Didn't want anybody else
Yeah.
in there.
Didn't want to have you included.
Not to mention I had all kinds of meetings I had to go to. So,
You're a busy guy.
well, it looks like we've kind of wrapped up the questions. We don't see anything else in there. We'll give it another minute or two to see if anybody else has any questions. If not, thanks again for joining us. I know that we have some other plans for
Yeah,
other things
definitely.
that we're going to do together here, and really looking forward to that.
Yep.
So, again, thank you for
Can we
joining
give a
us.
little plug as to what that might be?
We absolutely can.
Okay.
Let's do that.
So this same Accord has 1,500 MPa rear rails. And the reason it came to me, this car's only got 5 miles on it. It's a brand new car. When they drove it off the transport, it backed into a wall. And it buckled both of those rails. And that is probably the most intrusive repair procedure for a Honda that I've ever read. Because not only do you have to replace the rails, but you have the rear body panel, the trunk floor, a stiffener, 2 gussets, the outer rocker, section the B pillar, section the A pillar, and then the inner rocker has to be replaced in its entirety just to get at the rail where it welds in. So you're going all the way to the bottom hinge on the front door to replace rear rails on that car. And so we're looking forward to doing that one hopefully next year maybe?
Real soon.
Yeah.
Real soon. We actually got another question here, and I didn't notice that you used anything special. I thought it was just vice grips.
No,
We have a
we-
question of what are the clamps and pliers used? Never seen those before.
So those are Zebra clamps by Worth. And I've been using those for about 20 years. And the nice thing about they have about the same clamping force as a vice grip, and they're reusable. So you have a little tool that you snap them on with and you snap them off. But if you're
Okay.
putting a quarter panel on or something like that, you can actually hold the quarter on and still shut the door. So if you're putting vice grips in a door jamb, you can't shut the door and fit it. With these, you can actually do that. On a roof, I don't know if it had a big advantage or not.
I
but
thought
I've
we
just used them for years and I like them, and so I used them again.
I thought we were talking about the vice grips you use to hold the brackets on. You're talking
Yeah.
about the little
The
clips.
little
on
gold
the
and silver
roof.
clamps.
Got
Yep.
it. Got it.
So the kit comes with the little pliers, and it comes with 2 different sizes of the little Worth clamps, and I absolutely love those.
Okay, so we now have another question. When you did the plug welds, was 96 wire used or just 70S-6?
Great question. So Honda requires X96 wire, or the high-strength steel wire. There's a few different manufacturers. The X96 is the Bowler version of it. But you need to use that anytime you're welding 590 MPa steel to something 590 or higher. Those brackets were mild steel. I looked them up in the service information. They were 270 MPa, and we just used ER70S6. Had they been high-strength steel, if they were made out of 540 and the Aperture was also 540, we would have had to use the X96 wire. So great question.
Great. We'll give it a minute just to see if there are any other questions. We seem to be getting a flood of those here.
Cool.
Oh boy, we're going to have to read this one. This was a long one. Please suggest a parts required list in the repair procedure. Other manufacturers provide a parts list of required items when a replacement is... Can you scroll up, Tony, so I can see the rest? It looks like when a replacement is performed, I believe it is, yeah,
It's difficult.
yeah, we can't see the end of that question, but it sounds like what they're requesting is that you have put together a parts list, and we kind of talked about that a little bit earlier. Here it is. I believe it's very difficult to identify both parts as recommended adhesives. Where'd we go? Okay, adhesives and sealers. Adhesive type not identified until step 7. Step 8 says apply sealer with no specific product. So it looks like they're just looking for a little bit more specific information.
And that would be a total redesign on the format of the body repair manual, which comes out of Japan. So for me to influence that, I have about that much pull. I actually got, Honda never had procedures on outer wheelhouses and inner quarter panels until the 21 TLX. And that was only because I went there, and for a month I badgered them on us needing that information.
Yeah.
And now they said, well, we'll add that to new models coming out. So we got that done. Something like this would be a lot easier, just to put something at the beginning. Here's, tools required, parts required, that type of stuff. Definitely something I can bring up. It'd be a great addition to the manual, I agree. Yeah. As far as adhesive type, Honda's always going to call that out somewhere. As you mentioned, it's on step 7. But it's in there. And for sealers, we've never called out a specific product. And one of the reasons for that is you got to remember, when we write the procedure, this has to go global. So not every product is available in every country. So for us to say, use Henkel Torsen 504, whatever it is, I just made that up. That may not be available in half the countries we do business in. Yeah. So, and we've had that before, where we called out a specific product that wasn't available. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, now what do I do? How do I fix the car? Right. And so on adhesives, they're going to call it out. So I've only seen 8115, 8116, and 7333 by 3M called out. We allow you to use any competitor's equivalent of those. But on the seam sealers, we're going to leave that up to you to kind of figure out what is this there for, what works best, and what do I have in my arsenal.
So the next question, I think you've already asked.
Yep.
Has been asked and answered. It's just another question about why we don't have one kit. And
yep.
You kind of answered that
Great
one already.
idea.
So
great idea. I'd love to. There's a lot of things I'd like to make into kit formats and stuff like that, but
the audience shows you clearly there is pressure, so they pressure you right now, so you have to address that.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's good, because the more technicians or shops or people relay information like that to us, the more ammo I have to say, hey, there's a demand for this. Exactly. They really want this information. They're looking for it and they're not getting it. Mm-hmm. So the better argument I can make with as much ammunition behind me, the better the chance is that it could happen. Yeah. Right. And I know there are still people working on getting that done. Mm-hmm. And it's real easy in the parts catalog. This should not be hard to do, but it's not there on this model anyway, where when you pull up the roof, it should say C notes or something like that, and have the notes tell you that, hey, if you're ordering that, you need all this other stuff. Yeah. So that I should be able to accomplish.
Great. Well, I think that's probably the end of our questions, it looks like, but I have one for you. If there's somebody out there that's watching this, if they have a technical question, is there a way that they can reach you to get that technical question answered? Is there a Honda tech line or something that they can
So
get to?
there's not a Honda tech line for collision. We have tech line for our mechanics. There's not yet one for collision, but we have a method by where they contact you through RTS, and that usually goes to Scott Van Hooley. And then Scott has me on speed dial if it's something that he can't answer right out of the manual, and that works pretty well. And then we have the same arrangement with Verifax. If you're a VQ shop or something, you can call them. If they don't have the information, they get a hold of me. I talk to probably a dozen shops a day, but I'm also teaching 8 hours a day, so my time is limited to be able to answer everybody's questions.
Yep. I was just throwing you that softball to plug RTS for us.
Yep.
So,
Yeah,
all
Scott
right.
does a great job. He and I get along really good, and he comes up with some really good questions sometimes. So I like it when I have to go to Japan to get answers because sometimes information is just not clear or it's missing altogether.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us today. If you would like to see this video again, you can go to the iCar YouTube channel, and you'll see this entire broadcast there in a recording. So thanks for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you guys again next month.
Thank you for having me, bud.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.